Heidi. Order, order. We start with questions to Secretary of State for Transport, Perran.
Question 1.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer this question along with questions 7 and 18. The Government supports zero-emission vehicles through taxation incentives, vehicle grants and by funding infrastructure rollout. In January this year, EV sales were 42% higher than in January 2024, and the recent NAO report showed we are on track to meet the 300,000 public charge points needed for expected demand in 2030.
Perran.
Murazhar Mittendan, Mr Speaker. Electric vehicle demand is increasing. The Government's commitment to banning the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030 will have a significant impact on UK emissions, but there remain many misunderstandings and myths about electric vehicles. They are safer, cleaner and whole life costs are significantly cheaper. But what can the Government do to increase consumer confidence by dispelling some of the nonsense peddled by vested interests?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend's expertise in this field is very welcome. Showcasing the benefits of EV ownership and the growth of the public charge point network are vital to supporting the transition away from diesel and petrol-powered cars. As he will know, EV drivers can save hundreds of pounds a year, and the average range of a new EV is now 236 miles. That's about 2 weeks driving for most people, and of course it's cleaner and greener. We're working closely with industry stakeholders to promote positive messaging around EVs and improve consumer confidence.
James Ashley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One of the challenges facing people moving to electric vehicles is charging infrastructure, particularly in inner cities. Local authorities have worked to try and help this, but they have limited resources. My old team at Nottingham Council was able to do a deal with Uber, which has supplied 400 on-street charging units. Does the Minister agree with me that this sort of partnership, using public sector actors with private finance, could help resolve this? And could the Government look at ways they could work with local authorities to secure these kind of private-public partnerships?
Minister.
Well, it's great to hear about Nottingham Council's partnership developed under my honourable friend's leadership. The £381 million local EV infrastructure fund does just as he suggested and is expected to deliver 100,000 charge points across the country, supporting those drivers without off-street parking to switch to electric vehicles.
Sarah Coombes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The future of the car industry is very important to West Brom, and that future lies in electric vehicles. One of the key issues on the demand side is that consumers don't have enough confidence in second-hand EVs, despite manufacturer warranties and actually increasingly good battery life. So can I ask the Minister what steps the Government is taking to improve consumer buyer confidence in getting second-hand EVs?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend will be pleased to know that 1 in 3 used electric cars are now under £20,000, and data suggests that owners should expect an EV to last just as long as an internal combustion engine car. The United Nations Economic Commission for Europe have developed a new global technical regulation which would set standards for the lifespan of an EV battery and its minimum durability, and we're currently analysing options for the implementation of such regulations in the UK.
Sir Christopher Chope.
Mr Speaker, what the Minister says is all very well, but why doesn't the Government support my public electric vehicle charging points exemption from value-added tax bill?
Minister.
Well, I'm sure, as he knows, matters relating to taxation are a matter for the Treasury rather than for this department, but I'm sure that the Chancellor will be looking at the proposals he brings forward.
Wera, Hobhouse.
Mr Speaker, I welcome the increased uptake of electric vehicles and indeed we need to still dispel many myths. In my constituency in Bath, charging infrastructure is still a big issue, and what emerges is that really the distribution networks struggle to speed up in order to connect to the infrastructure that is needed. Can she outline what work she will be doing with distribution networks in order to increase electric vehicle charging networks expansion?
Well, I thank the honourable member for her question, and as I'm sure she knows, there has been a rapid increase in the rollout of electric charge points. It was up over 40% last year, but she's absolutely right. In some cases, it is difficult because it's held back by the availability of capacity on the network, and that's precisely why we're working across government, including with my colleagues in the Department for Energy and Net Zero, to unblock those things so that we can ensure that everyone can access the electric vehicle charge points that they need close to home.
James Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank the Minister for her answers. Minister, I'm not a petrol head, but I do love my diesel vehicle. Those of us who live in the countryside understand that to have a diesel vehicle is incredibly important, and there aren't any electric charging points across the rural countryside. There need to be more of them in the high street, more of them in the shopping centres, and there needs to be definitely more in the countryside where those of us who live and are disadvantaged by the electric car process as it goes forward. So can I ask the Minister this question? What's been done to help all those in the countryside, the rural community, those of us who live there and those of us who represent them, to ensure that they can always take advantage of electric cars as well? The charging points aren't there, the system doesn't work.
I think he's already been charged. Come on, Minister.
Well, the honourable member makes a really important point about ensuring that everywhere across our nation has access to electric vehicle charge points. We committed £200 million in the autumn budget to support charging infrastructure rollout, and that's bolstered by over £6 billion in private investment committed to 2030. He'll be really pleased to hear there are over 73,000 public charge points in the UK, with over 20,000 added in the last year, and a 45% increase in rural charge points in the last year.
Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I draw attention to my entry in the Register of Interests. Last year, just 1 in 10 consumers buying a new car chose battery electric. The private market for battery electric in 2024 was 20% lower than government intervention had tried to manipulate it to be. Without fleet sales, which we know are warped by huge tax incentives over practical vehicle choices, electric car demand just isn't there. So when will the Minister understand that people are crying out for a different way to defossilise and decarbonise their private vehicles? Battery electric just isn't popular, and when will they stop trying to tell people what they should want? This is just a government knows best attitude at its very worst, isn't it?
Well, Mr Speaker, one absolutely astonishing intervention by the member opposite. It was his government that introduced the zero emission vehicle mandate, and we are not proposing to change the trajectory that they introduced. I would, however, gently remind him that many fleet vehicles are in fact private vehicles, as people choose to lease their vehicles or access them through a salary sacrifice scheme. And last year, the UK was the largest market in Europe, in fact in the world, for EV vehicles. He's talking nonsense.
Greg Smith.
Well, Mr Speaker, the SMMT report in January simply doesn't back up what the Minister just said. I repeat, only 1 in 10 actual consumers, the people we all represent in this House, actively chose to have a battery electric vehicle. And as the Minister knows from her time on the Transport Select Committee when we looked at the future of fuel, there are other technologies out there. The government likes to say it's technology neutral, but the ZEV mandate's myopic focus on the tailpipe rather than whole system analysis effectively denies our innovators the room to defossilise and decarbonise in a manner that real consumers want. Surely the Minister sees that, and instead of trying to force people to buy battery electric, will they just get the bureaucracy out of the way and let our innovators innovate?
Well, Mr Speaker, I wonder if the Minister has actually met any vehicle manufacturers at all, because if he had, he would know that vehicle manufacturers are investing incredibly heavily on the switch to battery electric vehicles. I and my ministerial colleagues have met manufacturers representing 95% of the UK car market to understand their concerns. I will be working with them to ensure we support all UK vehicle manufacturers who have, as they would put it, bet the house on the transition to electric vehicles.
Emma Foody.
Question number 2, please.
We have empowered local councils to tackle the highway maintenance backlog, which is the result of a decade of underinvestment by the previous government. We have made an immediate start by providing an extra £500 million next year, an increase of nearly 40% for most councils. We will end the pothole plague on our roads, Mr Speaker, and ensure safer journeys for everyone.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. I've met with the Roads Minister recently and also with National Highways about the need for investment in Seatonburn and Moor Farm roundabouts, critical pieces of infrastructure which are already struggling with capacity and congestion. Local councils and the North East Combined Authority have all highlighted that upgrades are going to be crucial for growth in the North East. So could the Secretary of State consider how this government can support the project and whether the scheme could test a new form of transport business case for projects intended to deliver growth in all of our regions?
Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for her question and know she is a committed advocate for improvements to the road network in the North East. I do recognise the importance of Moor Farm and Seatonburn roundabouts for her local area, and I can assure her that both are being considered as part of a pipeline of projects for our future road investment strategy.
A bit more.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A recent Freedom of Information request revealed that of identified highway spending across the Bradford district by Bradford Council over the past 6 years, 49 million was spent within Bradford City itself, but only 4 million was spent within Keighley and my wider constituency, despite streets like Elliott Street in Silsden being in a very, very poor state of repair. So will the Secretary of State write to leaders at Bradford Council and remind them that highway spending needs to be spent equally across the whole of the Bradford district, including places like Keighley and Ilkley, not just within Bradford city centre itself?
So State.
I would say to the honourable gentleman that I'm not the sort of Secretary of State who's going to sit at my desk in Whitehall and instruct local authorities to spend certain amounts of money on certain roads. I expect local authorities to take strategic decisions based upon where the investment is needed, and I will leave it to local leaders to make those decisions.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Paul Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Too many British roads are in a shocking state of disrepair, as the Secretary of State says. In my constituency, Labour-run Merton Council has the worst roads in London and the second worst in the country, with 40% of local roads rated as poor by the Secretary of State's own department. Whilst I do indeed welcome the coming year's increase in funding, that is only a short-term measure and not based on need, with Merton and others having received less than authorities whose roads are in a better condition. As Labour-run Merton has failed to maintain its own roads, it's not being bailed out by their friends in government, will the Minister meet with me to discuss what action can be taken?
I'm very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman to ensure that roads in his constituency and across London are maintained to an adequate standard. The increase of £500 million that we allocated this year to highways maintenance represents an average 40% increase for local authorities. It will be making a difference, and I'm happy to discuss with him further.
Sam Rushell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The cost of transport to access... Oh, it's question number 3.
Minister.
Good morning, Mr Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to answer this question along with questions 13 and 17. The Government is committed to delivering the better, more reliable bus services that passengers deserve. We've already made significant progress introducing the Bus Services Bill into Parliament to help local leaders get the powers that they need, and announcing investment of over £1 billion to support and improve bus services.
Thank you. Can I thank the Minister for that answer as well? The cost of transport is a huge cost of living pressure for children and young people in my constituency trying to access education but also social and leisure opportunities. So what assurance can the Minister give me that the buses bill will end a system where buses and bus services are controlled by ideology to a system that puts them in the service of local people?
Minister.
I thank my friend for his question. The government knows how important local bus services are in providing access to education and allowing young people to get around. Empowering local leaders to improve services is at the heart of our reforms, including through the introduction of the Bus Services Bill, to ensure that bus services deliver for hard-working families and communities throughout the country.
Michael Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Worsley and Eccles face high levels of congestion when moving around our roads, especially during their rush hour commutes. Whilst we benefit from Greater Manchester's B network, it only takes a set of temporary traffic lights, roadworks or an accident to back things up. Can the Minister outline what steps are being taken to give the necessary powers and encouragement to our local communities and decision makers to create joined-up public and private transport networks that alleviate congestion?
Minister.
My humble friend is absolutely right to highlight this issue, and he will know that this government is acting quickly to respond to his concerns. As outlined in the English Devolution White Paper, we will empower strategic authorities to play a greater role in coordinating their local road network. This includes removing unnecessary Secretary of State consent requirements for certain local highway decisions, potentially including lane rental schemes, which will speed up decision-making.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So many people who live in rural towns across my constituency rely on bus services to go to work, school and hospital appointments. Too often, buses are running late or never turn up at all. Last week, I met local resident Nicola from Emily, who told me when she was unable to drive, it was near on impossible for her daughter Olivia to attend after-school clubs. Can the Minister advise me on how this government will hold failing bus companies to account and help improve services in our local areas?
Minister.
As my constituency neighbour, the honourable friend will be, I understand the challenges that her constituents face. Look, we know that local bus services are not currently delivering for people around the country. We are committed to changing this, and our Bus Services Bill will give local leaders the tools that they need to deliver reliable buses that truly meet the needs of local communities, including in rural areas.
Sir Gavin Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that the Minister is truly passionate about advocating bus services, but if he was privileged enough to live in the beautiful village of Hickson in my constituency and wanted to get to the surgery in Great Haywood, he would have to travel into Stafford on a bus and then a bus from Stafford into Great Haywood. Could the Minister update the House as to what additional help Staffordshire can maybe look forward to receiving in terms of making sure that Hickson residents are able to get directly to Great Haywood for extra support for the County Council?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. This government is determined to empower local leaders to make decisions about their local bus services. They can choose between a variety of options in that toolkit, between franchising, which is now open to all local transport authorities. We're lifting the ban on municipal bus companies, and we're also improving enhanced partnerships. It's really for local leaders to make those decisions, and we're empowering them to do so.
Member Pottinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rural communities like mine in Stratford-on-Avon rely on bus services as a vital lifeline, but too often these services are limited and infrequent, and private operators dominate the market in my area. Yet there is no minimum service requirement to ensure that people can get to work, school or medical appointments. Will the Minister tell my constituents if the government will guarantee a minimum level of service so that rural communities are not left stranded?
Minister.
The honourable member will be pleased to know that the Bus Services Bill includes the socially necessary local services measure. Under the new measure, local transport authorities operating under an enhanced partnership will need to identify local services which they consider socially necessary and put in place requirements that must be followed before such services can be changed or cancelled. They will also need to consider the alternative options that are available.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker. Last week I held a 2-hour question and answer session with Disability Action Yorkshire. One of the issues that came up was the inability for disabled people to use their bus passes before 9 o'clock, limiting them from getting to work or access leisure opportunities or see family and friends. So I wondered, wouldn't one of the best ways to improve local bus access be allow disabled people to access them before 9 o'clock? And if the Minister would agree with me.
No. Thank you, Member, for their question. The Government already invests £700 million into ENCTS in order to fund those bus passes. Obviously, under the last budget, we announced over £1 billion of funding in order to support buses. We changed the formula for BSIP, bus service improvement, to away from this competitive nature, those Hunger Games-style contests held under the previous government. So his local area will have received funding, and they are able to use that funding to go above and beyond what is set on a national level.
Wendy Moore.
Question number 4, please.
Secretary of State.
Open access operators will continue to have a place in our reformed Great British Railways. We have supported new proposals from Wrexham, Shropshire and Midlands Railway, and existing track access rights will be honoured. Open access can provide benefits, but it must not come at the cost of better services for passengers and better value for taxpayers.
William Moore.
Mr. Speaker, in her recent letter to the Office of Rail and Road, the Transport Secretary appeared to push against open access agreements, and yet last week, she has mentioned today, the government signalled its intention to support the request to licence the Wrexham to London Euston line, which will come through Aldridge in my constituency. So I'd like to ask the Transport Secretary to clarify her position on the Wrexham to the Euston line, particularly regarding the inclusion of Aldridge train station, which, as she will be aware, thanks to the Labour Mayor, the funding has been raided and put into his pet projects.
Secretary of State.
I do appreciate the commitment of the Honourable Lady to making the case for a new station at Aldridge, but I would gently point out to her that in the 14 years of her government, indeed, including her own stint in the Department for Transport, this station failed to materialise. I know that the West Midlands Combined Authority have had to prioritise the delivery of schemes that are in construction at the moment. That seems to me to be a reasonable approach, but I appreciate that she will continue to make the case for her own station.
Ray Morris.
Thank you. Open access operator Grand Central already run 5 services daily from Sunderland to London King's Cross through my constituency that unfortunately currently do not stop. My constituents have endured years of poor rail services from Northern Rail with just one overcrowded 2-carriage train an hour, often cancelled or delayed. While I welcome this government's investment in 450 new trains for Northern Rail, we need some immediate solutions. And can I ask, will the Minister urge the ORR to approve the application from Grand Central to allow these trains to stop at stations in my Stone constituency?
Open access operators currently account for 1% of our railways, and they do not always have the same public service obligations as other train operating companies. We have always supported open access operators where it genuinely adds value and does not divert revenue away from existing operators, all of which are supported by the taxpayer in some form at the moment. I would also add, we also need to make best use of constrained capacity on the rail network. And so ensuring that the railway can recover from problems on the railways is also important to me.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, sir. Talking of access, several years ago, Greater Anglia demolished half of Wickford Station to extend some of the platforms. But after nearly 3 years of endless excuses, missed deadlines and now frankly broken promises, they still haven't rebuilt it. And I regret to say I've lost all confidence in the senior management of Greater Anglia. If they told me today was a Thursday, I'd double check it. So can I go over their head and ask the Secretary of State for a personal meeting with the Rail Minister so we can finally get Wickford Station rebuilt despite Greater Anglia rather than because of them?
I will happily ask the Rail Minister to meet with the honourable gentleman to ensure that progress can be made at Wickford.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that my right honourable friend will be delighted about the news that Go Up will be operating a new mandate for return services between Swindon and Taunton. I wondered whether this, she would agree with me that this demonstrates the government's commitment to improving connectivity across the country, and whether we can hope for such improvements to connectivity in my little corner of the world in Berkshire.
I'm pleased my honourable friend has raised this proposal, which really does demonstrate the very pragmatic approach we've got to open access operators. It's also going to be the first cooperatively owned train service running anywhere in the UK. And so if there are any investors out there thinking about investing in this service, I would encourage them to look closely.
Question number 6.
Tuesday.
As part of our reforms to the railway, we have set out that we will continue to lease rolling stock when we take contracts into public ownership, but we will apply a single directing mind approach to eliminate barriers to sharing rolling stock better across the network. We will consider the best funding and financing structures for future orders and contracts in partnership with private capital.
Graham Ledbetter.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thank the Secretary of State for the answer. The Roscoes at the moment take over £1 billion worth of profit out of the railway. A substantial amount of that could be reinvested into improving a railway network. With the GB rail bill coming into Parliament soon, will the Minister seriously look at alternative financing models like Eurofima or even a publicly owned Roscoe that could deliver that rolling stock at a considerably lower price? Indeed, will the Secretary of State be more socialist and more ambitious with the bill?
I can assure the honourable gentleman that I do not lack any ambition when it comes to Great British Railways. It would cost billions in taxpayers' money to buy existing rolling stock at a time when there are very many pressures on the public purse. In terms of Eurofima, my officials have been engaging regularly with Eurofima to consider the potential for UK membership and how Eurofima finance could potentially be deployed in the UK.
Tracy Gilbert.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
The Department recognises the critical importance of the East Coast Main Line and has invested £4 billion in a combination of infrastructure enhancements and rolling stock upgrades that will help to deliver journey time, reliability and capacity improvements. The full benefit of this investment will be felt with the introduction of a revised timetable in December 2025, and the Department continues to work closely with Network Rail to explore opportunities to improve performance and resilience.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for that answer. My constituents have raised concerns on the reliability of services on the East Coast Main Line, with one constituent receiving delay repay compensation on 5 out of 6 journeys he took over a 2-month period. I welcome the correspondence I've had with the Rail Minister on the action of the Department of Transport are taken with rail partners, including through the East Coast Digital Programme. Can my honourable friend confirm that the first trains utilising new digital signalling technology will be on the tracks by the end of this year? And can she say when she expects passengers to feel the full benefit of the welcome upgrade?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. The East Coast Digital Programme is delivering digital signalling on 100 miles of the East Coast Main Line, and that technology will deliver an inherent improvement to service reliability and uplift performance and capacity across the line, including for her constituents. The first trains to start running under digital signalling are forecast from early 2026, and the number of services running under the digital signal will then increase until the full programme is expected to be complete in the early 2030s.
Father of the House, Edward Lee.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to answer this question along with question 21. It is our ambition through public ownership to deliver a more affordable railway. This year's fare increase of 4.6% is the lowest absolute increase in 3 years. We are committed to reforming the overcomplicated fare system and expanding ticketing innovation like pay-as-you-go in urban areas across the country.
Sir Edward.
When the Secretary of State finally steps in and knocks heads together and we get our Azuma train to Grimsby via Market Raisin, will the Secretary of State instruct the railway company to name the locomotive Margaret Thatcher? To remind us all that the best way, actually, to reduce the cost of rail services is to end restricted trade union practices.
Mr. Speaker, I hate to disappoint the Father of the House, but I'm afraid I won't be making such a commitment today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The British people pay some of the highest rail fares in Europe. However, this government seems to prioritise the size of the socialist state, kowtowing to trade unions with radical public pay rises and nationalisation plans. So, instead, will she please focus on improving the lot of commuters, particularly Romford's hard-working commuters, and take real steps to reduce rail fares and improve railway services?
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the honourable gentleman has the gall to raise this issue when, under his government, fares rose at around twice the speed of wages. I would also point out to him that since 2020, train operating companies have paid out nearly £1 billion to their parent companies, signed off by Conservative ministers in the last government. If he wants to talk about costs and value for money on the railway, I suggest he looks in the mirror to start off with.
John Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it was in fact a Conservative Secretary of State who forced fare rises on Transport for London in exchange for COVID emergency funding? And what steps will she be taking to put TfL on a better footing in the future, including backing great projects like the one in my constituency to upgrade and provide step-free access to one of the busiest stations in the country at South Kensington?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. In the middle of a global pandemic, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite was still obsessed with settling old political scores on fares in London rather than doing right by the capital. I can vividly remember walking into a meeting with the then Secretary of State to discuss how we keep services safely running, which ended up with him telling me this would have been so much easier if you hadn't frozen fares. Unlike the party opposite, Mr. Speaker, this government will always do right by the capital as well as the rest of the country.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask that this UK government doesn't follow the approach taken by the Scottish government when it comes to public ownership? ScotRail fares are set to increase again in April with an inflation-busting increase. This follows on from an 8.7% hike last year and the reintroduction of peak fares in September. Does the Minister agree with me that the SNP should be making rail more affordable, but instead it has hit passengers with painful fare hikes time and time again? The increases are bad for Scotland's rail passengers, bad for our economy and bad for the environment.
I can assure my honourable friend that we are going to bring the train operating companies into public ownership properly, and we won't be repeating the mistakes that we've seen in Scotland.
Shadow Minister Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very interested by that last answer, actually, because the government does think that nationalisation will reduce the cost of rail travel. So what lessons has the Minister learned from the SNP's nationalisation of ScotRail?
We will be increasing value for money in the way in which we operate our railways. To start off with, we will be getting rid of up to £100 million a year in management fees that we are currently paying out of the public purse to the train operating companies. We are determined to drive up performance on our railways and give better value for money to the taxpayer.
Well, the latest experiment in nationalisation has shown in just 2 years state inefficiency has pushed up costs, not reduced them, by £600 million, forcing fares to rise as delays have increased, customer satisfaction has slumped and services have been cut, not improved. The data shows that in England, Greater Anglia has been the best performer in the country, saving money for taxpayers while serving passengers with modern punctual trains. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Minister is about to launch a public consultation on nationalisation, one that's been as delayed as ScotRail trains. I'm told that even the plan to publish it today has been further delayed. The excuse is number 10 on the line. So if the Secretary of State consults, she has to be prepared to listen. Will she now listen to the deep concerns of the rail industry, not just to the ever-generous unions, and avoid another disastrous nationalisation?
I can assure the honourable gentleman that the consultation on establishing Great British Railways is coming soon, and I look forward to discussing it further with him. I am confident that by bringing the management of track and train together, we can strip out duplication in our railways, provide better value for the taxpayer, and ensure that trains are turning up on time with reliable and punctual services. That's what we're going to be delivering.
Question number 10, please.
This government recognises the importance of high-quality transport infrastructure as part of a well-functioning integrated transport network. We're supporting all local authorities to improve transport infrastructure, including through our £1.6 billion investment in local roads. I know his rural roads are littered with potholes. That's why they're getting a share of our 50% uplift.
Goldsborough. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Norfolk's economy to fire on all cylinders needs a decent rural road network. The Thickthorn Junction in my South Norfolk constituency is outdated and urgently needs upgrading to support the growth and unlock new homes. Will the Minister back this project and visit to see firsthand why the government should put Norfolk at the heart of our investment plans?
My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for the needs of his rural constituents. The central mission of this government is to support economic growth, and this is one of a number of road investments under consideration. In the last week, we've approved upgrades to 4 major road projects across England. On this specific scheme, I hope to be able to say more in the coming weeks, and perhaps I will be visiting his constituents.
There you are. Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Sleaford has a beautiful Grade 2 listed railway station in popular use. However, it is very difficult for those with disabilities to access the second platform, because there is no lift. I've long been campaigning for a lift, and I've been working with East Midlands Railway and the support of the previous government financially to work on a feasibility study for this lift, in keeping with the heritage station. Will this government back my constituents' ability to access this railway station, and will they back the ability for people to come and visit our beautiful town?
Well, I thank her for that question. Improving accessibility in our railway stations is, of course, incredibly important, and I'm sure the Rail Minister would be happy to write to her about the specifics of her station in order to consider the proposals that are being made.
Olivia Bailey.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
The last Labour government halved the number of people killed on our roads each year, but under the Conservatives that progress stalled, with only a 12% reduction between 2010 and 2023, when almost 30,000 people were killed or seriously injured on our roads. That's around 1 casualty every 18 minutes. And that shocking statistic is why improving road safety is one of my key priorities. We're developing our road safety strategy, the first in a decade, and we'll set out more details in due course.
Olivia Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that answer. Nearly 400 of my constituents have filled in my survey about the dangerously short slip roads on the A34 at East Ilsley and Beedon. This includes Nick, who never uses the Beedon junction when his young family are in the car, and he's even considering moving house because he believes it's a real risk to their lives. Will the Minister meet with me and raise these dangerous junctions with National Highways so that we can make them safe for local people?
Yeah.
Well, I commend my honourable friend for her support for safer roads. National Highways has undertaken several safety studies on sections of the A34, and I'm aware that improvement works took place on the East Ilsley slip in 2019, including work to widen, resurface and add new road markings. They continue to review concerns about safety on the road, and they would be happy to meet my honourable friend to discuss this further, and will plan a site visit, and I will of course keep up to date with progress.
Ashley Fox.
Mr Speaker, Bridgewater Railway Station has a bus stop which has remained unusable since its construction due to road layout and safety issues. Despite this being a relatively small fix, Somerset Council has yet to take action. What additional support can the Government provide to ensure that buses can stop at this station safely and improve connectivity in my constituency?
Well, I thank him for raising that question, and it does sound like it is a matter for his local council, but I'm sure that my officials will be very happy to work with them to provide any advice and support that they may need in order to work out how to provide a safer service in that area.
Please, Chuckle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 12.
Mr Speaker, improving performance is a top priority for this government as we establish Great British Railways. We meet regularly with managing directors of train operating companies and their Network Rail counterparts to demand action to raise standards. Great British Railways will reunite the management of track and train and will take joined-up whole-system decisions that improve performance for the benefit of passengers and taxpayers alike.
Please, Chuckle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Transpennine upgrade is the biggest rail infrastructure project in the country, and my constituency of Huddersfield is at the centre of it. One of the main benefits will be more reliable and faster trains for passengers. Can the Minister update the House on the project and confirm what steps are being taken to ensure local communities like those in Huddersfield fully benefit from improvements in rail performance?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight the importance of this investment for her constituency. The rail upgrade will deliver a doubling of seats between Huddersfield and Manchester and a 30% increase between Huddersfield and Leeds. Service reliability will also improve. 60% of the workforce will be employed within 25 miles of the route, and 66% of spend will be within the local supply chain, leading to local growth and jobs. Good news all round.
John Law.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to improve rail performance in my constituency by extending the Borders Railway. Extending the Borders Railway from Tweedbank to Hoyk, Newcastleton and on to Carlisle has great local support and has cross-party support. So can the Minister confirm that UK Government's share of the funding for the feasibility study as part of the Borderlands growth deal is confirmed and will be released to Scottish Borders Council imminently?
I understand that officials in my department are speaking with Scottish colleagues, and I hope to be in a position to say more on this soon, potentially as part of the spending review.
Sir Edwards.
Question number 14, Mr Speaker.
This government is committed to growth, which regional airports support by serving their local communities, creating jobs and acting as gateways to international opportunities. Heathrow expansion could enable more regions to access a bigger international network through their local airports, further boosting productivity.
Sir Edwards.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In my constituency of Tamworth, the largest sectoral employer is logistics. Tamworth sits within the Golden Triangle for distribution, centred around the European rail link. Within this hub is East Midlands Airport, which handles approximately 440,000 tonnes of freight each year, second only to Heathrow. So can I ask what steps the Minister will take to fuel economic growth across the West Midlands, reviewing capacity at our regional airports, including Birmingham?
The honourable member is exactly right. Freight is usually important for growth. That's why the Chancellor recently announced plans to build a new advanced manufacturing and logistics park at East Midlands Airport, which will unlock up to £1 billion worth of investment and 2,000 jobs at the site.
We now go to Topicals to Anne Baxter.
Number 1, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we're getting on with delivering this government's plan for change. Last week, I approved upgrades to 4 major road projects across Wiltshire, Leeds, Essex and Buckinghamshire. This £90 million investment will reduce journey times, ease congestion and improve safety. This is on the back of drivers switching to electric cars in record-breaking numbers, with sales in January over 40% higher compared to last year and nearly 20,000 public charge points added in 2024 alone. We're also backing the West Midlands Metro extension with a £205 million investment that takes trams from Wednesbury to Brierley Hill. We're cutting journey times and improving connections for towns with poor public transport links. And finally, Mr Speaker, yesterday we announced a £300 million investment to get Britain walking and cycling, with hundreds of new footpaths and cycle lanes. Mr Speaker, we're delivering the basics of a better transport system. That means improving the everyday journeys which drive economic growth and improve lives.
Shannon MP.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I recently met with key Scottish stakeholders to discuss proposals to bring a metro scheme to the Glasgow City region, interconnecting more and more parts of our region, including the towns and villages in my Paisley and Renfrewshire South constituency. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that it's vital the Scottish Government shows the same ambition for growth in Scotland as the UK Government has in its recent transport announcements? And will she work with the Scottish Government to ensure that this project maximises investment and opportunity for my constituents?
I will always work closely with colleagues in the Scottish Government to ensure that this Government's ambitions for transport reach all corners of the UK. The Scottish Government has had a record settlement through the budget, and so I look forward to hearing more about plans for a greater Glasgow Metro scheme as they develop.
Secretary of State, Gareth Bacon.
Mr Speaker, Heathrow Airport is already the single largest site payer of business rates in the country, paying approximately £124 million annually. To fund the Chancellor's next spending spree, the Valuation Office Agency is currently revaluating airports in England and Wales, and any significant increase could impact on Heathrow's ability to fund airport expansion and a third runway. Is the Secretary of State aware of the latest estimate of how much Heathrow's business rates will increase by?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, and this was a policy cooked up by the Evaluation Office under HMRC by the last government, and we have engaged with airports on this matter and asked them to continue to engage with the Valuation Office going forward.
Bacon. Thank you, Mr Speaker. I noticed that the Minister didn't answer my question, so I will assist him. The estimate is that Heathrow's rates bill will increase fivefold to £600 million annually, putting substantial additional pressure on Heathrow's finances. In the light of that, can the Minister confirm whether or not the long-standing policy that the full cost of a third runway, including related works like relocating, tunnelling or bridging over the M25, will be fully funded by the private sector and not by the taxpayer?
The Airport National Policy Statement from 2018, which was 2 governments ago, made it clear that any proposal, and we haven't had a proposal that's come forward, should treat surface access appropriately, and that should be funded by the private sector where possible.
John Whitby.
Mr Speaker, residents in Ashbourne have been left feeling hopeless and frustrated after waiting decades for a relief road. Over 700 HGVs pass through the town each day, endangering local pedestrians, increasing pollution and causing significant congestion. Would the Minister meet with me regarding the need to install a relief road for Ashbourne?
As my honourable friend knows, delivering a transport system that meets local, regional and national needs will play a vital role in delivering the missions of this government. I encourage him to continue to work with Derbyshire County Council, which will hopefully be under new leadership in May, and with our excellent East Midlands Mayor Claire Ward to advocate for his constituents' priorities, and I would of course be happy to meet him to discuss this.
Spokesperson Paul Collar.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In her previous role as Deputy London Mayor for Transport, the Secretary of State stated she was, I quote, clear in her opposition to a third runway at Heathrow. Can I ask the Secretary of State whether she is still clear in her opposition, and if not, what has changed her mind?
Mr Speaker, when I was Deputy Mayor for Transport in London, I was speaking in that capacity at that time, reflecting the views of the Mayor of London and City Hall on a previous Heathrow expansion scheme. As Secretary of State, I will consider any airport expansion proposals brought forward on their merits and in line with existing processes. Balancing economic growth and our environmental obligations is central to all of my work in this role, and I will always act in the national interest, doing what is right for the country as a whole.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At least 9 major roads in my constituency of Bournemouth West will be affected by roadworks in the next week. Seemingly endless, utility works and roadworks are a crucial issue for my constituents, who have told me it makes them late for work, school pickup, even hospital appointments. So can the Minister tell me what steps her department is taking to improve the situation for my constituents?
Well, I thank her for the question. This government stands with local road users who are frustrated by roadworks which cause unnecessary disruption. And whilst councils and utility companies should always work together to minimise the impact of their works, we are also taking action. We're doubling fixed penalty notices for utility companies that don't comply with certain requirements for carrying out their street works. And we've also extended overrun charges of up to £10,000 per day to weekends and bank holidays to prevent those overrunning roadworks.
Charlie Jewess.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Open access operators like Hull Trains offer excellent, cheap, unsubsidised intercity services to locations across the north. So why are ministers trying to block their expansion and stifle growth?
So stay.
There's a balance to be struck here. Services such as those that run to Hull, I welcome. They open up new routes, new connectivity. But I have asked the Office of Rail and Road to consider the balance in the revenue that they abstract from the public operators, and also to make sure that we are using constrained capacity on our network appropriately to deliver excellent services for passengers.
Lindsay Farnworth.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The RAC recently reported that potholes in Derbyshire are the worst in the country. But rather than welcoming over £75 million of funding to the East Midlands, the Conservatives at Derbyshire County Council claim this is not new money and it's bound up in red tape. Does the Minister agree with me that these are just more excuses and that the Conservative-controlled Derbyshire County Council should stop complaining and start fixing our roads?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The state of our roads is a daily reminder of Tory failure, and that's why this government has provided record funding to fix them. Derbyshire is getting its share of the extra £20 million going to the East Midlands Combined Authority. We expect them to get on with the job and to tell local residents how they're intending to use that extra taxpayers' money that they're getting.
Dave Dugan. Not here. Jonathan Brash.
People in Hartlepool have complained about the shocking underperformance of Northern Rail. He's witnessed passengers being asked to wait in toilets in order to allow more people onto the train. Services are frequently cancelled, promises of additional carriages have not materialised, and residents are regularly left stranded at stations. Will the Minister work with me to fix this unacceptable level of service?
Minister.
Thank my friend for his question. Ministers and officials are in regular contact with Northern. We recognise the performance is totally unacceptable and the challenges Northern faces means it will take time to become stable and a reliable service. Would be absolutely delighted to work with him.
Bob Blackman.
Mr Speaker, as you will know, I very rarely, if ever, agree with the Mayor of London, Steve Carr. However, the Secretary of State has answered the position in relation to her change of heart in the position, but will she commit to ensure that any proposal coming forward for a third runway at Heathrow will have a full impact assessment before any proposal is approved or denied?
Mr Speaker, I fully support the Chancellor in calling for fresh proposals for Heathrow to come forward. Some of our airports in the South East are running at or near capacity. We can't pretend that's not the case, and I'm not prepared to be part of a government that ducks the difficult decisions. As the person who may ultimately be taking planning decisions on any application for a third runway at Heathrow, I will judge any scheme on its merits. We will, of course, be updating the airport's national policy statement, and any expansion scheme must meet our legal environmental obligations.
Already contributes significantly to the UK economy, including Exeter with life sciences and climate tech. However, we're held back from reaching our full potential by underinvestment in transport connectivity, made worse by upcoming works at Old Oak Common and the continuing bottleneck of the A303. Will the Minister commit to developing a strategic investment plan to ensure that the South West Peninsula has the transport infrastructure it needs to unlock further growth?
Thank the honourable friend for his question. As I've said before, growth is the priority mission of this government. We're committed to empowering local leaders. A regional transport strategy and a strategic investment plan for the South West has been developed by the subnational transport body Peninsula Transport.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As well as being home to both GCHQ and NATO's Allied Rapid Reaction Corps headquarters, Gloucestershire has the largest concentration of cyber tech business and aerospace engineering firms outside of London. But Gloucestershire, particularly Tewkesbury, is also subject to slow, unreliable and grossly outdated rail services. It is also underserved by road transport links eastward. The government recently announced that it will develop a Silicon Valley between Milton Keynes...
Order, we're on topicals. I think you need an adjournment debate. Come on, who's going to answer that?
I will certainly meet with the honourable gentleman to discuss this matter.
Ruth Gadbury, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Department for Transport analysis carried out in 2017 showed that expanding Heathrow would, by 2050, displace 27,000 jobs from the UK regions to London and 17 million fewer passengers using non-London airports compared to not expanding Heathrow. Is the Minister therefore hoping that the same analysis done now would come to a different conclusion in order to ensure that UK economic growth really does benefit all UK regions and not just West London?
The government is committed to regional airports. I proudly possess my Yes to R2 badge today when we built a second runway in 2001 in Manchester. It's quite the opposite. The AMPS in 2018 made the expectations that connections from Heathrow to regional airports would increase if Heathrow were to expand, increasing productivity in those regions as well.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Northern Trains provide one train per day on the Gainsborough-Brigg-Cleethorpes line. Would the ministers agree that one train a day is pretty pointless? And could the minister arrange a meeting with myself and other MPs affected with the appropriate minister to discuss how we move forward on providing a better service?
Reliable, frequent train services are important no matter where in the country you live, and I will ask the Rail Minister for a meeting as he describes.
Alison Taylor.
Speaker, would the Minister agree that achieving economic growth requires sustained investment in our transport infrastructure? And would she be willing to visit Glasgow International Airport to learn more about how transport infrastructure can assist with the further development of the proposed investment zone in my constituency?
I agree that investment in our transport infrastructure across the country is essential for our growth mission. I'm aware of the investment zone bid involving Glasgow Airport, and my honourable friend, the Aviation Minister, would be delighted to visit in the near future.
Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if the Secretary of State is aware, but when there are serious weather or technical issues at Heathrow, large swathes of British Airways flights between London and Scotland are automatically cancelled. Now, British Airways say that if her officials, the Civil Aviation Authority, Heathrow and other airlines worked together, even in these circumstances, those cancellations could be minimised. So would she facilitate those discussions?
The member raises an important point. The resilience of the UK aviation sector is important and key to success, so we will facilitate any discussions to make sure we're always on an improvement trajectory.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr Speaker, disabled people's access was a condition of planning to open up the planning for the York Central development. However, I'm hearing that it's going to be bypassed and the planning will go ahead without putting disabled access on, which will clearly impede disabled people. So can we ensure that that difficult engineering work is undertaken before that planning is granted?
Accessibility to all our transport modes is extremely important to this government. I'll be delighted to meet with my honourable friend to discuss this matter further.
Will Foster.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Despite my constituency of Woking only being a stone's throw away from Heathrow, we have no direct rail link to the country's busiest airport. Last week, Heathrow Southern Railway applied to the government for a business case for these plans. When will the government consider that to ensure my constituents can get a train to Heathrow?
As well as the question of how many planes take off and land at Heathrow, the question of how people get to the airport is absolutely critical. So he makes an important point and I'd be happy to discuss it further with him.
Murphy.
Learner drivers in Basingstoke have been left stranded for months and in some cases years unable to book a driving test. It's affecting their jobs, education and the local economy. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that urgent action is needed to extend test centre hours, ramp up the recruitment of examiners and also to clamp down on the rip-off companies booking multiple slots only to flog them at higher prices?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise his concerns on behalf of learner drivers. On the 18th of December, DVSA set out a 7-point plan which recognises the need to fix the driving test booking system and get new drivers on the road, and I'll be holding them to account for delivering on that plan and the changes that he and his constituents need to see.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When the previous government cancelled HS2, they promised over £4 billion of project money for projects in the North and Midlands. I wondered if the government still planned to deliver on that and when we should expect to see that money in the North.
I hate to tell the honourable gentleman, but it was fantasy money. We're working through a pipeline of transport infrastructure projects and we'll be making announcements alongside the outcome of the spending review.
Josh Dean.
The long-promised Platform 1 lift at Hertford North Station, due to be delivered under the Access for All scheme, has been delayed yet again, leaving some of my disabled constituents travelling back up the line, getting a different train to Platform 2 so they can use the lift there. Will the appropriate minister meet with me to discuss how we can urgently drive this lift project forward for my constituents?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise concerns about disabled access at his local station. We want to ensure that everyone is able to access our public transport networks, and I would be happy to ensure that I or one of my colleagues meets with him.
Jim Dixon.
Mr Speaker, on the economic growth we've been discussing, I wonder if the Secretary of State could clarify, for the benefit of the party opposite, that economic growth depends on rather more than a well-oiled revolving door between the Tory party and big business, a door through which the former Tory Transport Minister and current member of the other place unsuccessfully attempted to walk last week.
Delivering economic growth requires a proper plan to be investing in our transport infrastructure, and that's exactly what this government is determined to deliver.
Okay. Lawrence Turner.
Mr Speaker, once Birmingham's Camp Hill line reopens, we will need track investment if we are to restore the pre-pandemic service frequencies on the cross-city line, including to Northfield and Longbridge. So will the Minister look in full at the case for upgrading Kings Norton Station?
I know my honourable friend is an assiduous and informed campaigner for improved rail schemes for his constituents. He will know that funding for the Midlands Rail Hub includes designs for the reinstatement of the island platforms at Kings Norton, and whilst decisions still need to be taken on future investment, I know he will be pushing for construction to start as soon as possible.
Josh Fenton-Glenn.
Mr Speaker, the Calder Valley line was listed as a top priority for improvements by Transport for the North's Electrification Task Force 10 years ago, back in 2015. Yet my constituents are still waiting. Will the Minister commit to this government delivering the infrastructure that the last government couldn't for my constituents?
Network Rail are currently completing a strategic outline business case covering electrification of the Calder Valley line. The business case will be considered within the context of the wider electrification strategy to determine how we deliver the best possible benefits across the region.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Next month, railway enthusiasts from around the world will be coming to my constituency as we mark the 200th anniversary of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, which took off from the town of Shildon. So will the Right Honourable Lady ask the Railway Minister to meet with myself and other MPs along that route to talk about how the government can be part of those celebrations?
I am sure that will be an invitation that the Rail Minister couldn't possibly refuse.
And on that basis, I look forward to a minister opening at the Coppell railway station, or at least doing the impact study on the main line. Right, let us